A man lost everything in one night. His ranch, his cattle, his family's 40-year legacy. All stolen by a corrupt banker who forged his father's signature. But this cowboy didn't pick up a gun. He didn't seek revenge. Instead, he did something that made the entire state of Texas talk about him for the next 100 years. He bought the bank. The same bank that destroyed him. And the man who stole everything from him? He ended up working for this cowboy, serving him coffee every morning for 22 years. This is the story of James "Silent Jim" Carson, a man who proved that the sweetest revenge is not destruction, it's success. And what he did will completely change how you think about enemies, setbacks, and building wealth from nothing. 1876, San Antonio, Texas. The Carson family had built something beautiful. 3,000 acres of prime cattle land, 2,000 head of cattle, a ranch that took 40 years and 3 generations to build. Old William Carson had started with nothing, just a horse and a dream. He worked until his hands bled. He survived droughts. He survived Indian raids. He survived the Civil War. And when he died in 1865, he left everything to his only son, 19-year-old James. James loved that land more than anything. Every tree, every hill, every stream. His mother had died giving birth to him. His father had raised him alone on that ranch. The land wasn't just property. It was his father's soul. It was his mother's memory. It was everything the Carson family had sacrificed for. And James swore he would protect it with his life. But James had a problem. He was quiet. Too quiet. He never spoke more than necessary. People called him Silent Jim. They mistook his silence for weakness. They thought because he didn't talk, he didn't think. They were very, very wrong. But one man saw Silent Jim's quietness as an opportunity. That man was Victor Holloway, the owner of San Antonio First Bank, the most respected man in town, the man everyone trusted with their money, and the most dangerous man Jim would ever meet. Victor Holloway had a secret. Behind his charming smile and fancy suits, he was a predator. He had stolen land from dozens of families using forged documents and legal tricks. He would loan money to ranchers at fair rates, then, when they trusted him completely, he would forge documents showing they owed 10 times more. When they couldn't pay, he would take their land. The law couldn't touch him. The judges were in his pocket. The sheriff owed him money. Victor Holloway was untouchable. And in 1867, he set his eyes on the Carson Ranch, the biggest prize in the county. And its owner was just a quiet 21-year-old kid who didn't know how the world worked. At least, that's what Victor thought. It started with a handshake. Victor Holloway rode up to the Carson Ranch one Sunday afternoon with a smile and a bottle of expensive whiskey. He told Jim that he had been friends with his father. He told Jim that William Carson had been like a brother to him. He offered Jim a small loan to expand the ranch, just $2,000 at a fair rate. Jim was suspicious. He rarely trusted anyone. But Victor was patient. He visited every week for 3 months. He brought gifts. He shared stories about Jim's father that only a close friend would know. Stories he had actually stolen from old ranch hands he had bribed. Slowly, carefully, Victor earned Jim's trust. And on October 14, 1867, Jim signed a loan document for $2,000. He read every word. He checked every number. Everything looked correct. He signed his name and shook Victor's hand. That handshake would cost him everything. 6 months later, Victor Holloway walked into the county courthouse with a different document. This one showed that William Carson, before his death, had taken a massive loan of $40,000 using the ranch as collateral. The document had William's signature. It had witnesses. It had official stamps. And now, with William dead and the loan unpaid, the ranch belonged to the bank. Jim couldn't believe it. He had never seen this document. His father had never mentioned any loan. He knew it was forged. Everyone knew it was forged. But the judge was in Victor's pocket. The witnesses were paid liars, and Jim had no proof. On April 3, 1868, the sheriff came to the Carson ranch with 10 armed men. Jim stood at the door with his father's rifle. For one long moment, everyone thought there would be bloodshed. But Jim looked at the men. He saw that some of them were crying. They didn't want to do this. They were just following orders. Jim put down the rifle. He walked out of his family home with nothing but the clothes on his back, his father's pocket watch, and $47 in cash. Victor Holloway stood watching from his carriage with a smile on his face. He had won. The Carson ranch was his. And Silent Jim? He was nobody now, just another broken man walking into the desert. The next 2 years were the darkest of Jim's life. He drifted from town to town. He worked as a ranch hand for $1 a day. He slept in barns. He ate scraps. Some nights he thought about ending it all. What was the point of living? Everything he loved was gone. His father's legacy was destroyed, and the man who destroyed it was getting richer every day. Jim started drinking. He got into fights. He was arrested twice. He was becoming exactly what Victor Holloway wanted him to become: a nobody, a failure, a forgotten man. But something happened in the winter of 1869 that changed everything. Jim was working on a small ranch near El Paso when he met an old man named Henry Wright. Henry was 73 years old. He had been a successful businessman in New York before moving west. He had made fortunes and lost fortunes 3 times in his life. And when he saw Jim, he saw something familiar. He saw a young man with fire in his eyes, but no direction for that fire. One night, Henry sat Jim down by the campfire and asked him a simple question. "What do you want, son?" Jim said he wanted revenge. He wanted to destroy Victor Holloway. He wanted to burn down everything that man had built. Henry listened quietly. Then he said something Jim would never forget. "Revenge is a young man's game. It feels good for a moment, then leaves you empty. But success is the revenge that keeps giving. Every morning Victor Holloway wakes up and sees you thriving, that is true pain for him. Every night he goes to sleep knowing you won, that is true torture. Don't destroy him, son. Outlive him, outgrow him, outshine him. That is revenge worth having." Those words hit Jim like a thunderbolt. He had been so focused on destruction that he forgot about construction. He had been so focused on taking Victor down that he forgot about building himself up. That night, Jim made a decision. He would stop drinking. He would stop fighting. He would start building. And one day he would return to San Antonio not as a broken man seeking revenge, but as a powerful man offering mercy. That would hurt Victor Holloway more than any bullet ever could. Henry Wright became Jim's mentor. For 2 years, Jim worked on Henry's ranch during the day and learned business at night. Henry taught him everything: how to read contracts, how to spot fraud, how to negotiate, how to value land, how to identify opportunities. Most importantly, Henry taught Jim about patience. He said the market punishes the impatient and rewards the patient. Every great fortune was built by men who could wait. Jim listened. He learned. He saved every penny he earned. By 1871, Jim had saved $340. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And Jim had noticed something that nobody else was paying attention to. The railroad was expanding across Texas. Jim had heard rumors from travelers. He had read old newspapers from back east. The Texas and Pacific Railway was planning to build new lines through West Texas. And Jim realized something crucial. Every town that got a railroad station became 10 times more valuable. Every town that got skipped became a ghost town. The question was, where would the railroad go? Jim spent 6 months investigating. He talked to surveyors. He bought drinks for railway workers. He studied maps. And slowly he pieced together the route. The railroad would pass through a small, worthless settlement called Dusty Creek. Population 43 people. Land price 50 cents per acre. Nobody wanted Dusty Creek. It had no water. It had no cattle. It had nothing. Except it sat exactly where the railroad needed to build a station. Jim used his entire savings of $340 to buy 680 acres around Dusty Creek. The seller thought Jim was insane. He was happy to take money from a fool. Jim didn't argue. He just signed the papers and waited. 2 years later, the railroad arrived. Dusty Creek was renamed Junction City. Jim's worthless land was suddenly worth $50 per acre. His $340 investment was now worth $34,000. In 2 years, he had multiplied his money 100 times. But Jim didn't sell everything. Henry had taught him better than that. He sold half the land for $17,000. He kept the other half and built a general store, a hotel, and a stable. Within 5 years, Junction City had 2,000 residents. Jim's remaining land and businesses were worth over $200,000. He was one of the richest men in West Texas. But he wasn't done yet. He had a promise to keep, a return to make, and a man named Victor Holloway, who had forgotten all about the quiet young cowboy he had destroyed 8 years ago.
1876. Jim Carson rode back into San Antonio for the first time in 8 years. But he didn't ride alone. He came with lawyers from Houston, bankers from Dallas, and documentation that would shake the entire town. You see, during his years of building wealth, Jim had also been building a case. He had found other families that Victor Holloway had destroyed. He had collected their stories. He had gathered evidence of forged signatures, paid witnesses, and corrupt judges. He had found the man who forged his father's signature, a drunk named Patterson, who Victor had paid $50 for the job. Patterson was dying of consumption and wanted to confess his sins before meeting God. He signed a detailed confession naming Victor Holloway as the mastermind behind dozens of land thefts. Jim had something else too: money. Enough money to hire lawyers that couldn't be bribed. Enough money to bring in judges from outside the county. Enough money to make Victor Holloway's protective wall crumble. But here's where Jim showed his true genius. He didn't go after Victor Holloway directly. Not yet. First, he went to the other victims, the families who had lost their land to Victor's schemes. Most of them were still in the area, working as laborers on land that used to be theirs. Jim made them an offer. He would fund the legal battle to get their land back, all of it. He would pay all the lawyer fees, he would pay all the court costs. In return, they would sell him 30% of the recovered land at a fair price. The families couldn't believe it. This stranger was offering to give them back 70% of what they had lost for free. They agreed immediately. The lawsuits began, one after another. The confession from Patterson, the testimony of bribed witnesses who were now old and guilty, the evidence of forged documents. The mountain of proof was overwhelming. The new judge, brought in from Austin, had no loyalty to Victor Holloway. One by one, the verdicts came back. Guilty, fraud, return the land. Within 18 months, Victor Holloway had lost everything. His bank failed, his reputation was destroyed, his political friends abandoned him.
The fine gentleman who used to invite him to dinner now crossed the street to avoid him. And the Carson Ranch? It was returned to its rightful owner, James "Silent Jim" Carson. Here's where the story could have ended with violence. Jim had every right to destroy Victor Holloway completely, to throw him in prison, to leave him homeless on the streets. But Jim remembered Henry Wright's words, and he did something that shocked everyone in San Antonio. He offered Victor Holloway a job. Not a good job, a humiliating job. Serving coffee and cleaning floors at the Carson Ranch, the same ranch Victor had stolen, the same land Victor had taken. Now Victor would serve the man he had tried to destroy, every single day. Victor had two choices: take the job and survive, or refuse and starve on the streets with no money, no friends, and no future. He took the job. For 22 years, until the day he died, Victor Holloway served Jim Carson. He brought him coffee every morning. He cleaned his boots. He heard Jim's children call him Mr. Jim with love and respect. He watched Jim become the most beloved man in the county. He watched Jim build schools and churches. He watched Jim help other families build wealth. And every single day, Victor was reminded of what he had lost and what Jim had gained. The entire town saw it too. They saw the man who had terrorized them now serving the man he had tried to destroy. It was the most powerful lesson San Antonio had ever witnessed. Evil doesn't win. Patience wins. Integrity wins. And the best revenge is living so well that your enemy has to watch you succeed every single day. Jim Carson lived until 1923. He died at 77 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The Carson Ranch had grown to 15,000 acres. The family businesses were worth millions. And every year, on the anniversary of Jim's return to San Antonio, the town held a celebration in his honor. They called it Silent Jim Day, a day to remember that silent strength is the most powerful strength of all, that patience defeats anger, that building defeats destroying, and that the sweetest victory is the one where even your enemy has to admit you won.
What can we learn from Silent Jim? First, your darkest moment is not your final moment. Jim lost everything at 21. He spent 2 years as a broken drunk. But that wasn't his story. It was just a chapter. Second, knowledge is the weapon nobody can take from you. Victor took Jim's land. He took Jim's money. He took Jim's home. But he couldn't take what Jim learned from Henry Wright. That knowledge was worth more than all the land in Texas. Third, patience is more powerful than anger. Jim waited 8 years. He built his case slowly. He grew his wealth quietly. And when he finally returned, he was unbeatable. Fourth, help others on your way up. Jim didn't just save himself. He saved dozens of families. And those families became his allies, his friends, his community. He built an army of people who loved him by helping them first. Fifth, the best revenge is success they have to witness. Killing Victor would have taken 1 second. Making Victor watch Jim's success took 22 years, every single day. That's real revenge. Remember Silent Jim's story. When life takes everything from you, you have a choice. You can seek destruction, or you can seek construction. One path leads to emptiness. One path leads to legacy. Choose wisely. Somewhere right now, you might be in your own darkness. Someone might have taken something from you, betrayed you, destroyed what you built, and you're wondering if it's worth going on. It is. Jim Carson was sleeping in barns and eating scraps. He had $47 to his name, and he became one of the most powerful men in Texas. Not through violence, not through shortcuts, through patience, knowledge, and helping others win. Your story isn't over. Your darkest chapter isn't your final chapter. Start building. Start learning. Start helping others. Your San Antonio is waiting for your return. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell. More stories like this are coming. I'll see you in the next one.